All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Tim and Tim Show with Making Moves in Multifamily Live. I got my favorite co-host Tim Vest back today. Look at we haven't seen him in 2 weeks. You guys have had to put up with me sitting here jabbering for 30 minutes straight about nonsense. Just kidding. We did some fun shows and I really enjoyed it. But welcome back, Tim Vest. How the hell you been, man?
Good. Can't complain, man. Just got off a 14-hour flight.
Yeah,
But
that could be a little stiff. Did
yeah,
you get one of those nice pods or whatever again on the flight?
I did. With Qatar Airways, they're called Q Suites, and they're
Nice.
amazing. They are
Yeah.
amazing.
When we flew to Hawaii, I was hoping that we would have some kind of seat like that, but it was just some generic first class
Yeah,
seat. And I was like, wait, this was not worth the money.
man. Everybody that went on this trip, we flew Ethiopian Airlines, Qatar, or like um, KLM. Everybody was like, man, these airlines could tell American, like US based airlines could tell them a thing or two because the service
Yeah.
was just better all the way
Yeah.
across the board with the foreign airlines. It's crazy.
Yeah. Man. So it's kind of a good segue into today's show topic about freedom. Um, Freedom can be a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But one of the things I wanted to illustrate by us having this conversation is by investing in ourselves and investing in a real estate business, we gave ourselves the freedom to be able to fly in the Q suites and given ourselves the freedom to be able to make those choices to increase the quality of our lives. Now, it does come with sacrifices. Don't get me wrong. This is not sit here and boast and brag about how much money we make and that we fly first class. And I don't do it all the time. And frankly, I save up a ton of points in order to make to offset the cost. So it's not just like, I'm throwing out $10,000 flights left and right. Like that's not what it is. But being able to upgrade the quality of your life and flying first class when you're going on a long international trip and really being able to say, yeah, I can do that, no problem. That level of freedom, it takes a level of stress off of your day-to-day decision making. When you have money, freedom, you're able to make those decisions, increase your quality of your life, increase the quality of life of your loved ones and people that you surround yourself with, and make yourself have a more enjoyable time, right? I mean, the whole point of what we do as real estate investors is to give ourselves freedom. And the freedom can look like a lot of different things. It could be time freedom, it could be money freedom, it can be relationship freedom, right? To have the ability to build relationships with who you want, when you want, where you want, doing all of the things on your own time. And don't get me wrong, like a lot of my time is spent working. And I have this conversation with my wife quite frequently. It's like I don't look at what I do as a job. It's not like, I'm not in my office working because I have to. It's because I want to. And I enjoy what I do. And like real estate is combined into my life on a day-to-day basis. And I did that by design on purpose because I wanted the freedom to be able to do what I want, when I want, with whom I want, and where I want. Right. And I'm glad that you upgraded yourself on that long flight because I probably wasn't cheap, but it definitely made the quality of your life over that 15-hour flight significantly better than flying coach in the middle row between two big burly guys that are sitting there on a long flight with you.
Well, yeah, and what it does is it allows me to basically a 14-hour flight. Basically, I slept for 7 hours,
Did
and
you really? That's a lot of sleep for you,
yeah, well,
especially on a plane.
when you can lay flat,
Yeah.
um, and actually have your own little pod, it's possible. But like I worked for about 5 hours. I slept for about seven, um, and then just did some other stuff for a little bit of it. But now I hit the ground running. I'm basically caught up on all my emails from the last 2 weeks. Um, I'm rested. I'll be able to hit the ground when I finally get back in Charlotte later this afternoon. I'll be able to hit the ground there as well. So, yeah, being able to have that freedom to do those things makes it possible. It also makes it possible for me to, work in my company, help manage my company, and do it effectively so that I'm not completely, out of pocket for the entire time, right?
Hmm.
Um, so, yeah. So, hey, thanks, Dennis. I appreciate it. Glad to be back. Glad to be back in the United States for sure.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know, Tim Vest is still in transit on his way back. He went to Africa to hike Mount Kilimanjaro, which tell us a little bit more about that experience. Like, well, how has real estate been able to enable you to do those types of things? But talk more about like why you wanted to do this trip and the sense of accomplishment that you got from doing it.
Yeah. So, if I had been doing a W-2 job, guys, like this was over 2 weeks. I left on Sunday the 8th, and what's today, the 24th, and I'm still traveling back. So 16 days, 17 days later. W-2, I would have never been able to do this. Maybe I could have walked away and taken 2 weeks vacation, but it would not have been possible, quite frankly. So being able to do this, that, real estate has allowed me this kind of freedom. It's allowed me this kind of flexibility. I didn't completely walk away from things for 2 weeks. I was checking in. Tim will tell you, I had a couple of phone calls with him. I was checking emails. I've never seen people on the side of a mountain on their phones.
You know, I still, I'm I'm still floored. I don't know how you got service on some of those days up that mountain.
So guys, like if you don't know, like I went with this group of guys from GoBundance, all entrepreneurs. There were 14 of us, and there was this one day where we were on the mountain, our campsite, and we can look down in the valley and we could see lights. There was a town at the bottom of the mountain, and we were able to get intermittent cell service. Depending on the way the wind was blowing, literally, and anytime there was cell service, you'd see guys like up on the highest rock with their phones up in the air, and they're like, but it's like 14 entrepreneurs who have done pretty well for themselves. That's how they live, right?
Yeah.
Even on the side of a mountain in Africa, they're checking email, they're checking in with their businesses, and I was doing the same, but I had that freedom to do that. Tim will tell you, I called him, like 2 months ago. I was like, hey, I got this invitation. A little worried about stepping away from the company for 2 weeks, and Tim was like, no, man, go.
Yeah. Well, I remember that conversation. I was like, now that you brought it up, you have to go. Like it's non-negotiable. Like, you must go to this because it's something that you want to do. And if you don't take yourself out of the business, and it's very easy to just continue working all the time. I mean, very easy to do it day in, day out, every weekend, every holiday. And it's like, if you don't make time for yourself, your business can overrun your life. And that to me isn't freedom, right? I mean, the business isn't going to burn to the ground if you walk away for a couple of weeks. Hopefully it won't, at least, right?
Yeah. And if it does,
and if it does, you got problems. But it's a good way to figure out, like the best way to figure out how to replace yourself is to walk away from it for a week. See what broke and then come back and try to fix it again, right? And continually doing that. But you got to create the space, got to create the opportunity for things to go wrong so that you can identify problems and fix them later on.
Yeah, and guys, so I'm kidding about all of us on the mountain, and we actually got cell service a couple of times, but every single guy there, all 14 of us, we all admitted this one night at dinner. We had gone on that trip expecting not to have service for at least 10 of the days we were there at all. And for 7 days straight, we didn't think we'd have any kind of service at all. So everybody walked into that going, I'm going to walk away from my company, my business, and leave it in somebody else's hands for at least 7 to 10 days, right? So that was very difficult. But at the same time, the reason I left my W-2 partly was so that I could do things like this. And part of the reason this is important to me is, I want to go see if I can climb to the top of Kilimanjaro. Like, I just want to know if I can. I mean, first time I ever did a triathlon, I just wanted to know if I could complete one, right? And now I know I can. and here we are. But it's important to have these bucket list adventures. It's important to have these things you do where you go kind of experience life, and maybe to steal a phrase from GoBundance, right? Live life big. And that's why we work so hard, right? Is so that we can go do these things for ourselves, for our families. And this was just an opportunity when Dustin, the guy who put it all together, was like, hey man, the spot opened up, do you want to go? I was like, man, I really do want to do this. I had not taken 2 weeks away from my family ever. My wife and I were sitting there talking about it. And I was like, I don't think I've ever been away from my wife more than like 6 days at a time since we've been married, and for 25 years. And so this was a big deal. for me to be able to do this. It was important for me to be able to go do this, and the real estate, this business that that we've created, it completely enabled me to do it, not just from a cost perspective, but just from a time freedom perspective as well.
And this is just the first of many. I mean, it's amazing how when you do something different like this, right? Like, you look at it and you say, I can't go away from my business for 2 weeks. Like, it's just impossible. Well, then you go do it, and you're like, well, wait a second, that was possible. What else can I do? And when I can't stress this enough, but when opportunities are presented to you, you got to be a yes man. Like, I Wednesday, not anymore, not lately, and I need to get back to it. But Wednesdays used to be my yes man day. Like if we were going to go out in the boat or go play golf or do something, right, that was going to be interactive and fun. It was like, yeah, I'm going to do that. If the opportunity is presented on Wednesdays, I'm going to go do that. But that also holds true for life experiences. When somebody presents you in a life experience, you got to be a yes man, because when else are you going to be able to have those opportunities, right? And it's not to say that you won't have that again in the future, but there's no guarantees, right? So like you got to live for today and do all of the opportunities that life presents you as they come up, because it's very easy to get in the habit of saying no, 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 like, and making other things the priority. But you have to make life and experiences the priority first above all else. And you can't do that unless you go through a period of suck. And what I mean by that is when Tim and I were building this business, it was a lot of work. I mean, we both had W-2 jobs. We woke up early, we stayed up late. We were always networking with people, going to events, paying for mentorship, paying for a lot of different things, not seeing any return on our money for years. And then we finally like started to hit our stride and we're making these successful businesses. And we had to go through that period of suck in order to give us the life opportunities that we have today. And it's not to say that you couldn't have those any other way by working a successful W-2 job or not. But the saying that really, really resonates with me is live how others won't so you can live how they can't. Right. And that just says that you have to have a period of sacrifice, right? And you got to sacrifice in order to have that freedom you want later on. You can't have your cake and eat it too if you want to have it in a very fast time period. And I'm not saying that you couldn't have freedom and stuff like that in the long run by long-term investing in real estate, but that wasn't what I wanted. And I'm sure as hell know that that wasn't what Tim Best wanted either. Like we wanted our freedom, we wanted it now, and I was willing to work around the clock and do whatever necessary to get what I was trying to achieve. And you have to do the same thing. It's not something that happens, just overnight. It is a dedicated period of your life where you have to say, I am sacrificing the things that I love to do today so that I can do things tomorrow that others can't do, right? Like Tim Vestman
Yeah.
mentioned in the W-2 job. If you had that W-2 job, you wouldn't have been able to go away for 16, 17, 18 days, whatever it took, right? But that's because over the course of many years, instead of, I'll use this as instead of going out partying with your friends on Saturday, I was working on the business, or Tim Vest was working on the business, right? And I would have much loved to go to a barbecue and hang out and have fun and shoot the shit. But I saw the bigger vision and I sacrificed that Saturday for a future Saturday. And that future Saturday is like investing, because that it will continue to pay you more and more and more and more and more. I gave up one Saturday today to have many infinite Saturdays in the future. And Saturday is a bad word. Maybe we use a weekday, right? So it's a little more, it resonates a little bit better. But instead of doing something I wanted on a Friday, like now I have infinite Fridays that I can do whatever I want because I was willing to sacrifice those Fridays for a certain period of time.
Yeah, and I always, it's kind of a joke. In fact, I just got back from this trip, and we were all sitting around one night talking about it, and people are like, "What are your hobbies?" And I'm like, "I don't know what you mean." Like, because and it goes to what Tim's talking about. Like, I have hobbies, I just haven't done them in like 2 years. Um, you know, I don't pick up the guitar, right? There's a lot of things I don't do anymore right now because we're in that build phase, and this is the first time I've really stepped away in a while. Um, but that's part of what he's talking about here is that sacrifice. Like sometimes you have to give that stuff up, right? Um, I always joke with people. When people call me and they're like, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What advice would you give me?" I was like, "Cancel your Netflix subscription."
Ooh,
and they always he always kind of chuckled, like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Seriously, like all the
Yeah.
things that are going to distract you and make you think you want to go do this because you have free time. I'm like, get rid of it because
Yeah.
for the next year or 2 years, you have no free time."
Hmm.
And that may seem extreme, and I know there's guys out there pitching something different, but I tell you what, the guys I just spent some time with, the mentors that I've had, that I've ridden in the cars with for hours on end, every single one of them will tell you one thing, and that is, yeah, I got a lot of freedom now, but for like 2 to 5 years when I was building all this, no, it was around the clock.
Hmm.
And that's kind of that's what it takes, guys. Like if you
Yeah.
want to,
What are
you
you
know,
willing to sacrifice today for your future?
right, and I know there's this idea of like you got to have balance and stuff like that. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm just going to get real with you for a second. When you're an entrepreneur and you're just starting out, there's no balance. You
Mm-mm.
got to live it.
And that's what I'm saying with the period is suck. I mean, you got
Yeah.
to go through that period, right? Because everyone sees, I made a post a couple days ago. Today is September 24th. I quit my W-2 job on September 21st or 20. Yeah, September 21st. And every single year it pops up on my newsfeed and I do a recap of where I'm at today because I want to track my progress and I want to see that growth, right? That's how I set goals and I measure myself to make sure that I'm constantly moving the ball forward. And for many, many years before that, there was no successful posts because I was working on it and I was building the business. I was building the reputation and the relationships and everything necessary. And I didn't start to capitalize on all of those things that I had built for many years until 3 years ago. But everyone sees the post and they're like, man, you did so much in 3 years. Like, that's impossible for me to do. I'm like, no, it's not. Take 3 years to do what I did. And then after 3 years, after you quit your W-2 job, maybe you can have the same thing. It's persistence gets tired of opportunity gets tired of persistence, and you have to stick with it for a long period of time. Because I would tell somebody that I've been doing this for 6 years because of the 3 years before of learning and then 3 years after, right? So it's 6 years total. It's not just a 3-year endeavor that we've been able to post these wins.
Yeah, no, definitely not. It's the whole iceberg analogy, right? Like you only see
Oh
so
yeah,
much at
that's a
the
good
top of
one.
the water, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We were throwing all these little phrases and analogies around, but seriously, guys, like it it's completely worth it. Completely worth it. And I'll share with you a little story. Um, one of the aha moments for me was I took a vacation with my family at a W-2 job at the time. Um, and we had 2 days in Dublin, Ireland, and I spent a day and a half of that walking around Dublin on phone calls with my W-2 job,
Hmm.
right? So, people are like, "Hey, you were in Dublin and all this," and I'm like, "Guess what? I was working. I was working most of the time." And folks would say, "But didn't you just say that you were on Kilimanjaro working as well?" Yeah, I was. Difference is, I was doing that because I wanted to. This is my company, right?
Right.
And on the W-2 job, I'm walking around Dublin. I didn't make any more money. My business didn't grow. Nothing changed in my life except that I literally missed a day and a half in Dublin with my family because of a W-2 job, right? I
Hmm.
had no choice. And so not only is it about time freedom, but it's also about the choice, right? As an entrepreneur, I could have gone and turned off my phone for 10 days and hiked the mountain or whatever, right? That would have been my choice. And it would have been a completely legitimate choice to make, right? It also was my choice that, hey, I got cell service. I'm just sitting here looking at some valley. I can also be checking some and checking in on a couple of things. So that was a choice. And, I think that's what people miss sometimes about like that time freedom and all this. It's not just time freedom, it's the power of choice and being able to like directly see the results or not see the results based on the choice you make. All those things. It's a really, really powerful thing, especially when you get your head in the right place.
Well, the biggest thing is your input determines your output.
Right.
In your W-2 job, it doesn't, right? You showing up is or not showing up still results in the same output.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like if I have the choice, I'm gonna take an extra, I'll take the 30 minutes and I'll go off by my side or off on my own and I'll pick up a phone or answer some text messages or emails or whatever that's necessary so that my team and my business can continue to grow with me or without me there, right? And that is directly related to the input of the choice that I made to make my time sacrifice And in that given moment, to spend it on something that I wanted to do by my own choice, not because I had to, it's because I wanted to. And
Yeah.
that freedom is only achievable when you have the ability to do those types of things because you made the sacrifices necessary to get where you are today. And I'm, not trying to, the biggest thing that we're trying to do here is inspire somebody that's listening to this podcast, whether you're listening to it live or you're listening to it later, or if this is a reposted one that we post later on, is the inspiration that you have to work hard for a given period of time before you're going to start to see the fruits of your labor. And then once you start to see the fruits of your labor, it is a direct result of making the choices that you've made along the way, and is not something that is given lightly or freely, or just, it's not passed out. It has to be earned. It is something that you must go through the struggle to achieve, because otherwise, you know what they say is, like, those that don't pay attention, right? And if you didn't have to work for something, you're not going to care about it as much. And that's why I think that if you build your own business, you do work so hard on it and you do care about it so much, because it is a sense of pride, it's a sense of accomplishment, it is a sense of self-worth. You can attach your self-worth to something like this. It is something that is almost indescribable, right? Of like the ability to kind of have that, the freedoms of time, money, and relationships on your own terms. And sometimes people get confused about what that really looks like, because they're like, oh, well, you're working all the time. I'm like, I don't really feel like I'm working though, because, like, it's not like I got to clock in and clock out. It's not like it's something I want to do this. Like, if I made the choice to go to the gym this morning, it's because I wanted to, right? If I made the choice to answer an email when I'm on vacations, because I wanted to. It's not because I had
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. And by the way, Stathis. Sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. But yeah, I mean, I think he makes a good point here where he says inspiration only works for those that want it, right? And I think that's a big point there to take away from it is like, hey, I see a lot of folks out there who, take inspiration wherever they can find it, but it doesn't necessarily do anything for them because they just don't want it that way, right? And that's what it really comes down to, right? Like if you want something bad enough, you'll do whatever you got to do to get there. And
Yeah.
but one of the things that I really that I really appreciated about this trip is like I talked about how I like was working on the plane. I literally over the last 2 weeks have set aside things where I was like, I'm gonna leave that for the plane. I'm gonna leave that for the plane. I knew I had 14 hours on the plane, and I would drive myself crazy if I was just sitting there staring at a TV screen. Right? Like I can't watch 14 hours of movies, guys. So I was like, I'll leave that for the plane. I'll leave that for the plane. And that was one of the beautiful things is like I can choose to leave that for the plane for a week from now, 2 weeks from now, right?
I think it's a really good exercise of practicing focusing on the urgent and the important.
Right.
And if it's not urgent and it's important, you can either choose to do it now or choose to do it later. And that's exactly what you did.
Yeah, yeah, and the things that were urgent, for the most part, I addressed a couple of them myself, but some others I was like, hey, can you handle this? Like
Mhm.
I threw a couple things at Vitali, I threw a couple of things at my assistant, I threw a couple of things, across the table and said, hey, can you handle this while I'm out? And they did. But then, like you said, the important things they needed to be addressed. I just addressed them last night,
Mhm.
um, and they got done. So it's just it's just a completely different mindset. It's a completely different way of life. I love it. I absolutely love it. I love the fact that I can jump in my car and it's work, right? It's a day of work. I hit the road. I'm on the road for 12 hours checking out properties, but man, I'm driving around the state of North and South Carolina, talking on phone calls to people I want to talk to for the most part, and I'm checking on properties I own. I'm not stuck in some cubicle somewhere staring out some window. I mean, I love it, guys. Like it's way better.
It's funny. It's like last week I did one of those because you weren't here. I had to fill that role. So I had a 16-hour day. I left my house at 4:30 in the morning. I drove 550, 600 miles, something like that. I stopped at 3 different properties. I met with our construction manager. I met with 3 different roofers. I met with all of our maintenance guys. And just being present with them made them feel heard and respected, and that I was the owner of these properties and I was coming to visit them and meet them and talk with them. They're like, wow, it means a lot to me because you came and you cared and you showed a little bit of effort, that
Yeah.
you actually want to do something with these properties and not just let them, kind of fall apart. And then so then we had another issue with a roof at one property and I had to go handle a tenant problem because I was the closest one to the problem. I didn't get home till 8:30, 8:45, something like that night. And I remember pulling, kind of in the last like half an hour home stretch, I was like, God, I am so tired, but I wouldn't change this for anything.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
man, that sense of freedom of being able to make the choice and do what I wanted to on that day, my input directly determines my output, felt really good and makes it all worth it.
Yeah. Christine, I don't disagree. I think business hours work more hours all the time. Um,
Yeah, I
so
definitely don't work less now that I've started my own company.
yeah, and it ebbs and flows, guys. Don't get me
Yeah,
wrong.
that's fair.
It ebbs and flows. Like I said, I was on the ground with 13 other guys. We were all kind of like at various stages, and there were guys that had pretty much checked out of their businesses for a little while, and then they had a staff turnover or something, and they were heavily involved. Now again, they were back to working 16-hour days, but it ebbs and flows, and I completely expect that to happen, right? Completely expect for Tim and I to staff up and for us to be able to take a little time away, and then something changed and us have to jump back in. When Tim and I went down to Charleston about a month ago now, and we met with like Tim Bratz and his crew. I thought Bratz said it well. It was like, you're going to do this, and then it'll come here, and you'll do this, and you'll do this, and what he's talking about is like, you're going to have heavy growth, and it'll scale back a little bit, and you'll hit it again. And with that comes those ebbs and flows that we're talking about, which
Hmm.
is one day you're going to be working a lot, the next day maybe you have a little more time on your hands. And I think I told Tim this like a year or two ago. I mean, there's some guys in that abundance group that we hear of, and they check out for like 30 days at a time. But so they'll take like 2 months a year. They'll work like 5 months, take a month off. But the 5 months that they're working, then they are grinding. They are all in, you know.
Hmm.
And then they take a month off and they just go do something for a month. And
Hmm.
it's amazing to have that kind of freedom. And
It's
and I aspire to that. I aspire to like do that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's the freedom to do what you want when you want, right? I mean, I don't know, me personally, I don't know if I would want to do something like that. I'm kind of more little things here and there. Like I get bored after like 5 or 6 days. I'm like, all right, I'm ready to be done with this. And kind of get back into my normal flow and like some work and stuff like that. But that's okay. I mean, you know, Tim Best would rather take 30 days off in a row, 60 days, in a whole year. I might want to take off 10 6-day stints, right? Or 10 weeks in different variations of it. It depends on whatever you want, but that's kind of the beauty of it is, lifestyle by design. And it's understanding the big picture, understanding what you're working for, having the wherewithal to go through the period of suck to build what you want to be successful and then reap the fruits of your labor later. I mean, because every time I've ever looked at it, it is always if I can get paid later or invest in something that if I can do the work now and receive the benefit later, it always comes back to me tenfold for sure.
Yeah. And hey, Keisha, good to see you. Hope you're enjoying that cruise you're on right now. Sorry I couldn't be there. But
Oh yeah,
thanks
I
for
forgot
that.
she's on a cruise right now. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, hey, listen, I want to take 30 days at a time, because once I'm in Asia, I'm just going to hop on over to Australia. I don't want to have to make that flight twice.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
So
So, all right, man. Well, good to chat with you. I'm glad that we were able to hop on the call today. Glad to have you back, and we'll keep growing. And yeah, that's it. Right. So we'll catch you next week.
all right, see
Peace.
you guys.